to determine altitude. Instead of going, well, 40-15, Sinner could have done. No,
Jannik Sinner just walked away from a Masters 1000 event as the world's top-ranked player, and honestly, the internet did not know how to handle it. But before you jump to conclusions about this being some kind of red flag, there's a 71-year-old coaching legend who's stepping in to set the record straight, and what he's saying might completely change how you look at Sinner's entire season. Let's rewind for a second. Sinner just came off a successful Wimbledon title defense. He was expected to roll straight into the North American hardcourt stretch, starting with the Canadian Open in Montreal on August 2nd. That's the natural next step, right? Win Wimbledon, ride the momentum, show up in Canada, keep stacking wins. Except that's not what happened. Over the weekend, Sinner dropped a statement announcing he was pulling out of Montreal entirely. In his own words, he said he'd weighed every factor carefully and ultimately decided to put his health first. Short, simple, no drama. But of course, in professional tennis, nothing stays simple for long. The reaction was immediate and split right down the middle. Tournament organizers in Canada were understandably let down. Losing the number 1 ranked player from your draw is never good news for ticket sales or TV ratings, and nobody's pretending otherwise. But on the flip side, a huge chunk of fans and analysts looked at the bigger picture, the packed calendar, the physical toll of a long grass season, and figured this was less about avoiding competition and more about smart, calculated planning. And that's exactly where Rick Macci entered the conversation. If you don't know the name, Macci isn't just some random voice online. This is a coach who helped shape Serena Williams during her childhood years, someone who's spent decades inside the mechanics of what makes elite players tick, both physically and mentally. So, when he speaks up about a decision like this, it carries weight. Macci took to social media and laid out his perspective in a way that reframed the entire situation. His core argument was pretty simple. Sinner isn't operating under the same pressure as everyone else on tour. Most players walk onto a court hoping to win. Sinner walks onto a court expected to win every single time. That expectation changes everything about how a season has to be managed. Macci described it as a completely different psychological weight. One where staying locked in, staying sharp, and not letting your focus slip for even a moment becomes exhausting in a way that's hard for outsiders to fully grasp. He even called that constant state of high-stakes intensity something close to mental magic, the ability to stay switched on match after match without ever blinking. According to Macci, Sinner and his team understand that feeling better than anyone, which is exactly why they're the ones best equipped to decide when to step back. In other words, skipping Montreal isn't Sinner running from a challenge. It's Sinner and his camp protecting the resource that matters most, his body and his mind, so that he can peak when it counts most later in the summer. And when you actually look at what's coming up on the calendar, that logic starts to make a lot more sense. With Montreal off the table, Sinner's next scheduled stop is the Cincinnati Masters, which kicks off on August 13th. This isn't some random tournament he's using as a placeholder either. Cincinnati has basically become one of his favorite hunting grounds in recent years. He lifted the trophy there in 2024, then came back in 2025, and made it all the way to the final again. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern of a player who performs at an extremely high level on that specific surface and in that specific environment. So instead of grinding through Montreal on tired legs after a demanding grass swing, Sinner and his team are essentially choosing to arrive in Cincinnati fresher, sharper, and fully ready to defend that strong track record. Then, after Cincinnati wraps up, the final stretch of his North American hardcourt run leads straight into the U.S. Open, the last Grand Slam of the season, and arguably the biggest stage of them all. When you line all of that up, Macci's point starts to look less like damage control and more like a legitimate breakdown of professional-level scheduling. 2 tournaments before Grand Slam instead of 3 isn't laziness. It's load management, the same kind of strategic thinking you see across other sports at the highest level. Fewer matches, but higher quality preparation, aimed at making sure the body and mind are both firing when the pressure is at its absolute peak. Of course, not everyone is going to see it that way, and that's fair too. Tournament directors have every right to be disappointed. Fans in Montreal who were hoping to watch the world #1 live have every right to feel a bit shortchanged. Tennis is a sport built on rivalries and marquee matchups, and every missed appearance chips away at that experience for the people who show up expecting to see the best players compete. But here's the thing worth sitting with. Sinner isn't just any player fighting to stay relevant on tour. He's the guy every single opponent circles on their calendar, the guy who's supposed to win regardless of who's across the net. That kind of target on your back requires a completely different kind of management, one where saying no to a tournament isn't weakness, it's strategy. Whether or not this decision pays off, we won't really know until we see how he performs in Cincinnati and then at the US Open. If he shows up firing on all cylinders and pushes deep into both events, this whole conversation is going to look like a masterclass in scheduling. If he struggles, though, you can bet this Montreal withdrawal is going to get brought right back up as the moment people point to. Either way, one thing is clear. This isn't a story about Sinner ducking competition. It's a story about a player and his team making a calculated bet on peak performance over raw participation. Rick Macci clearly believes that bet is the right one, and given his background reading elite athletes, that opinion is hard to just brush aside. So now it's your turn. Do you think skipping Montreal was the smart move, or is Sinner risking momentum right before the biggest stretch of his season? Drop your take, because this debate is only going to get louder as Cincinnati approaches.